Karen Williams entered Judge Judy's courtroom believing she had created the perfect victim story, but she had no idea that the judge already had the receipts, the security footage, and the secret recording that would turn her $2. $3 million lawsuit into a complete public disaster. Before watching this shocking courtroom case review, make sure you subscribe to the channel first, comment below where you're watching this video from, and subscribe for more powerful justice stories like this. Now let's begin and see how one entitled HOA President's Fake Victim Act completely collapsed in front of Judge Judy. When HOA President Karen Williams walked into Judge Judy's courtroom demanding $2.3 million from McDonald's, she truly believed she was walking into an easy payday. In her mind, she was not a greedy woman trying to abuse the legal system. She was a victim, a helpless customer who had been trapped by a giant corporation and its supposedly addictive food. She had prepared everything: the fake tears, the dramatic weight gain photos, the emotional testimony, and a lawyer who had promised her that McDonald's would rather settle quietly than fight an embarrassing public case on national television. But Karen had made one serious mistake. She underestimated Judge Judy. What Karen did not know was that Judge Judy had already reviewed the McDonald's security footage before she ever entered the courtroom. Not just one short clip, hours and hours of footage showing Karen willingly ordering food again and again. Not one meal, not two meals, sometimes 4 complete meals at a time. The footage showed Karen visiting multiple McDonald's locations in a single day. It showed her ordering large amounts of food, eating it happily, then returning later for more. It showed her screaming at teenage employees when they suggested that maybe she had already ordered enough. Judge Judy had the receipts too, literally thousands of them. Those receipts showed Karen had spent more than $47. Zerozen at McDonald's in only 8 months. That number alone would have made the courtroom pause. But it was not even the most damaging evidence. The most devastating piece of proof came from Karen's own neighborhood. One of her neighbors had secretly recorded an HOA meeting where Karen openly bragged about her plan. In that recording, Karen talked about how she was going to milk McDonald's for millions while eating a Big Mac during the conversation. She did not sound helpless. She did not sound addicted against her will. She sounded proud, greedy, and fully aware of what she was doing. What happened next was not just a legal defeat, it was a complete destruction. Karen's lawyer was left speechless. Karen herself broke down in tears. And the internet would soon turn the entire moment into a national celebration of justice. Judge Judy did not simply dismiss the lawsuit. She delivered one sentence so sharp, so brutal, and so perfectly timed that it ended Karen's Public Victim Act forever. Because sometimes entitled people do not just lose, sometimes they get exposed. Karen Williams was not an ordinary complainant. She was the kind of HOA president who made her own neighbors feel trapped inside their homes. For 3 years, she had ruled Maple Ridge Estates like a small neighborhood dictator, issuing violation notices for the smallest and most ridiculous reasons imaginable: a lawn 1 inch too tall, a child's chalk drawing on a driveway, a trash can visible from the street, a birthday balloon tied outside too long. Karen treated every tiny neighborhood detail like a crime against civilization. In just 1 year, she had personally filed 47 separate complaints against residents. Some were petty. Some were cruel. One elderly veteran was cited because his wheelchair ramp had not been approved by the HOA. A family was threatened with fines because their toddler's birthday balloons were called visual pollution. But Karen's real obsession was not neighborhood rules. It was McDonald's. Every morning at exactly 9:37 a.m., Karen's silver BMW would pull into the McDonald's parking lot on Elm Street. The employees knew her order before she reached the counter: 2 Big Mac meals, large fries, large Coke, apple pie, chicken nuggets, and that was only breakfast. She would come back for lunch and order the same thing again, usually adding a McFlurry. Dinner meant a third visit, often with filet-o-fish sandwiches, extra burgers, and more fries. The teenage workers began calling her the four-meal lady behind her back because she would regularly order enough food for an entire family and then eat it alone. Sara Martinez, the morning shift manager, later described how frightening Karen could become when something was not available. If the restaurant ran out of Big Mac sauce, Karen would explode. If apple pies were not ready, she would scream. Once, according to Sarah, Karen threw her purse at the counter because the apple pies had sold out. Sarah's voice shook when she later remembered it. Karen had yelled that McDonald's was ruining her life by not having enough food ready for her. But the strange truth was that Karen kept coming back, day after day, meal after meal, location after location, and while the employees thought they were dealing with an angry regular customer, Karen was quietly building a plan in her own mind, a plan that would turn her obsession into profit. The lawsuit claimed that McDonald's had deliberately targeted Karen with addictive ingredients. According to her complaint, the company knew she had an addictive personality and exploited her weakness for profit. Her lawyer, Rick Morrison, filed documents painting Karen as a helpless victim of corporate greed. The claim was dramatic. McDonald's, Karen argued, had scientifically engineered its food to create dependency. She said the food had caused her to gain 83 pounds and suffer severe emotional distress. She wanted $2.3 million for pain and suffering, another $500, zero for medical expenses, a lifetime ban on McDonald's advertising in her neighborhood, and mandatory addiction warnings on all McDonald's packaging. On paper, Karen wanted to sound like a victim fighting a powerful corporation. But the truth was far more disturbing. Security cameras showed that Karen's McDonald's habit was not limited to one restaurant. She rotated between 4 different locations throughout the day: breakfast at Elm Street, lunch at the downtown branch, an afternoon snack at the mall location, dinner at the highway McDonald's. When one location recognized her and employees became concerned, she simply drove somewhere else. Karen also had a different story for different staff members. Sometimes she said she was buying food for her sick mother. Sometimes she claimed the meals were for office workers. Other times, she said she was helping feed homeless people. But the footage told a different story. Karen was eating the food herself, often in her car, often in empty parking lots, often immediately after ordering. She was not being forced. She was not being tricked. She was not helplessly dragged back against her will. She was choosing to do it, and she was doing it in massive amounts. The biggest revelation came from her own HOA meeting minutes and the secret recording made by a disgusted board member. During that meeting, Karen had bragged about her plan to retire early. She openly said she was going to gain as much weight as possible eating McDonald's, then sue the company for millions by claiming they had made her addicted. She called it the perfect victim strategy. She even suggested that other HOA board members should try similar lawsuits against different fast food chains. That recording changed everything because it proved that Karen was not a victim. She was planning the lawsuit before the supposed damage had even fully happened. Her lawyer, Rick Morrison, had taken the case because he believed it would bring media attention. He thought McDonald's might settle quickly to avoid bad publicity. He saw a chance to appear on television, speak about corporate responsibility, and maybe turn Karen's story into a headline-making case. But Rick did not understand who his client really was. Karen was already infamous in Maple Ridge Estates. Her neighbors knew her as a bully, a complainer, and a woman who used rules as weapons. She had previously filed ridiculous lawsuits that went nowhere, including one against her neighbor's wind chimes, one against a local bakery over birthday cake font discrimination, and another against the city for allowing children to play loudly in public parks during her quiet hours. Neither Karen nor her lawyer realized that McDonald's had already been quietly building its defense for months. Corporate security had flagged her excessive visits. They documented her behavior toward employees. They collected receipts, surveillance footage, and witness statements. Most importantly, They obtained the secret recording where Karen admitted the entire lawsuit was part of a planned scam. By the time Karen walked into Judge Judy's courtroom, the truth was already waiting for her. Judge Judy had seen everything, and she was ready as word of Karen Williams's lawsuit began spreading through Maple Ridge Estates. Her neighbors could hardly believe what they were hearing. This was the same woman who had spent years punishing everyone else for tiny rule violations. The same HOA president who threatened fines over trash cans, grass height, children's chalk, birthday balloons, and wheelchair ramps. Now she was standing in front of cameras claiming she was the helpless victim of a fast food corporation. To her neighbors, it was almost impossible to watch without anger. Maria Santos, who lived next door to Karen, knew better than most what kind of person Karen really was. She had seen Karen leave the neighborhood every morning at nearly the same time, driving toward McDonald's like it was part of her daily schedule. She had seen Karen return with multiple bags of food, then sit inside her car or behind her curtains while eating enough meals for several people. And then, after all that, Karen would sit down and write violation notices against the same neighbors she had spent years harassing. Maria had seen the pattern. She had seen the hypocrisy. And she knew the lawsuit was not about addiction, pain, or corporate manipulation. It was about money. Karen spent weeks preparing for her big moment in court. She practiced her victim story in front of the bathroom mirror, rehearsing the pauses, the trembling voice, and the fake tears. She wanted to sound wounded, overwhelmed, and helpless. She wanted the audience to see a woman whose life had supposedly been destroyed by a giant corporation. She bought clothes in larger sizes to make her weight gain look more dramatic. She gathered old photos to compare with her current appearance. She even created a fake food diary, backdating entries to make it look like she had desperately tried to resist McDonald's, but had been pulled back again and again by something beyond her control. It was not enough for Karen to lie. She wanted the lie to look emotional. She wanted it to feel convincing, and for a short time, it worked. Several local news stations ran sympathetic stories about the case. They framed it as a David versus Goliath battle, a suburban woman taking on one of the biggest fast food companies in the world. Cameras showed Karen wiping tears from her face as she described how her life had supposedly spiraled out of control. But while Karen enjoyed the attention, McDonald's corporate legal team was quietly doing something much more important. They were gathering facts. They pulled security footage from every location Karen visited regularly. They created a detailed timeline showing where she went, what she ordered, how often she returned, and how she behaved inside the restaurants. The footage revealed a pattern that completely contradicted her victim's story. Karen did not look like someone being dragged helplessly into a restaurant by addiction. She looked like someone enjoying every second. In one clip, she ordered multiple meals, ate in her car, then came back inside less than an hour later to order again. In another, she laughed while carrying several bags of food to her BMW. In another, she became angry when the employees told her that a certain item was unavailable. The footage showed tantrums, lies, repeat visits, and deliberate choices. The evidence was overwhelming. McDonald's also documented how Karen used different excuses at different locations. At one restaurant, she said the food was for sick relatives. At another, she claimed she was feeding office employees. At a third, she said she was buying meals for people in need. But the cameras showed her eating the food herself, often alone and often almost immediately after purchase. Then came the recording. The secret HOA meeting audio became the centerpiece of the case. In it, Karen's own voice could be heard explaining her plan openly. She talked about gaining weight, suing McDonald's, claiming addiction, and using the lawsuit as a path to early retirement. That recording did what no receipt or security clip could do by itself. It exposed her intention. It proved that this was not a woman who had been trapped by a corporation. This was a woman who believed she had found a way to turn greed into a payout. Behind the scenes, Judge Judy's production team had also received an anonymous tip about Karen's reputation in her community. That tip opened a door into years of complaints, neighborhood tension, and legal nonsense. They learned about Karen's history of threatening residents, filing ridiculous lawsuits, and using her HOA position to make people's lives miserable. The more they looked, the more the lawsuit against McDonald's appeared to be just one part of a larger pattern. Karen did not only want money, she wanted control. She wanted people to fear her. She wanted to use rules, courts, complaints, and victim stories as weapons against anyone who refused to bend. When Judge Judy reviewed the evidence herself, she was furious, not because Karen liked McDonald's too much, not because she had gained weight, but because Karen had built an entire case around blaming other people for choices she had made willingly, repeatedly, and proudly. Even worse, she had used the court system as if it were another HOA rulebook she could twist to punish whoever she wanted. Judge Judy understood exactly what she was looking at. This was not a confused customer. This was not a helpless victim. This was a professional complainer trying to convert her own behavior into someone else's liability. And Judge Judy had no patience for that. The night before the trial, Karen sat in her bedroom surrounded by boxes of McDonald's receipts. To her, those receipts were evidence that she had been trapped by addictive food. She planned to present them dramatically, showing the court how much money she had spent and how often she had returned. She did not understand that those same receipts would become one of the strongest weapons against her. They showed choice. They showed repetition. They showed scale. More than $47,000 spent in 8 months, sometimes hundreds of dollars in a single day, multiple locations, multiple orders, repeated visits. No one forced Karen to do that. No employee dragged her into a restaurant. No advertisement placed 4 complete meals in her hands. The receipts did not show victimhood. They showed obsession, planning, and personal responsibility. Karen smiled as she organized the boxes, convinced she was about to become a millionaire. Her lawyer, Rick Morrison, was just as confident. He had prepared a dramatic opening statement about predatory marketing, corporate greed, and consumer vulnerability. He believed he could pressure McDonald's into a settlement, or at least create enough public sympathy that Karen would become the face of a larger conversation. But neither Karen nor Rick knew that Judge Judy had already made up her mind about the nature of the case. The evidence was too strong, the fraud was too obvious, and the exposure was going to be swift. By the time Karen laid out her outfit for the next morning, practicing her victim face one final time, Judge Judy was preparing a very different kind of courtroom moment. Not a sympathetic hearing. Not a debate about marketing ethics. Not a conversation about fast food addiction. A takedown. The next day, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Cameras were rolling. Spectators whispered as Karen entered, dressed in what she clearly intended to be her victim outfit. The dress was loose and carefully chosen to highlight the weight gain she wanted to blame on McDonald's. In her hand, she clutched tissues she planned to use during her emotional testimony. She nodded at the cameras with quiet confidence. She believed this was her moment. She believed the audience would feel sorry for her. She believed McDonald's would look like the villain. But she had no idea she was walking into a trap that would collapse around her within minutes. Judge Judy entered the courtroom with her familiar stern expression, but people who knew her well could see something different in her eyes. This was not just another strange lawsuit. This case had angered her because it represented everything she despised: fraud, entitlement, manipulation, and a person trying to profit from lies while pretending to be powerless. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table, ready to perform. Rick Morrison stood first. With dramatic confidence, he began his opening statement. Your Honor, my client is the victim of corporate manipulation and predatory marketing. McDonald's deliberately targeted her with addictive ingredients, knowing she had a vulnerable personality. Karen nodded along, dabbing her eyes with tissues at just the right moments. She tried to look embarrassed, wounded, and brave all at once. Morrison continued painting her as an innocent woman crushed by a giant corporation that had supposedly engineered her cravings for profit. For a few seconds, some spectators seemed curious, maybe even sympathetic. But Judge Judy did not move. She listened in silence, her expression darkening with every sentence. When Morrison finally finished, Judge Judy did not immediately ask Karen to explain herself. She did not ask about her emotions. She did not ask about her weight gain. She looked directly at Karen Ems Williams. Judge Judy said in a calm voice, "Before we continue, I would like to show you something." That sentence changed the energy in the courtroom. Karen's confident expression began to falter. The bailiff rolled in a large monitor. Karen looked at the screen, then at her lawyer, then back at Judge Judy. For the first time that day, she seemed unsure. The first video began playing. It was McDonald's security footage. On the screen, Karen could be seen ordering 4 complete meals at one location. Then the footage showed her taking the food to her car and eating it. Shortly after, the timestamp showed her returning inside to order again. Then another time appeared. Then another. 9:47 a.m., 10:53 a.m., 11:31 a.m. Same location, same day. The courtroom watched in silence as Karen's victim's story began falling apart frame by frame. She was not shown crying. She was not shown struggling. She was not shown trying to resist. She was shown eating with enthusiasm, returning for more, and making choices again and again. Karen's face went pale, but Judge Judy had only just started. The second video began playing, and this time the courtroom did not just see Karen's behavior. They heard her own voice. The audio came from an HOA meeting, secretly recorded by one of the board members who had grown tired of Karen's bullying and schemes. At first, Karen's face showed confusion. Then, as the sound became clear, that confusion turned into pure panic. Her voice filled the courtroom. "I'm going to gain as much weight as possible eating McDonald's, then sue them for millions. It's the perfect victim strategy. I'll claim they made me addicted and retire early off their settlement money." The courtroom gasped. The sound was immediate and sharp. People turned toward Karen, stunned that anyone could be arrogant enough to say those words out loud and still walk into court pretending to be a victim. Karen's mouth fell open. Her lawyer, Rick Morrison, froze in place. For the first time, he looked like he was learning the truth about his own client at the same time as everyone else. His confident posture disappeared. His dramatic courtroom energy was gone. He did not look like an attorney leading a bold case against a corporation anymore. He looked like a man who had just realized his client had dragged him into a fraud. Judge Judy slowly stood up. The entire courtroom fell silent. The monitor had done more damage than any argument could have done. The receipts showed the spending. The security footage showed the choices. But the recording showed intent. It showed that Karen had planned the lawsuit before walking into court. It showed that her victim story was not a cry for help. It was a strategy. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen. Her voice was steady, controlled, and devastating. Ems Williams, "McDonald's did not make you addicted. Your greed, your entitlement, and your complete lack of moral character made you a con artist." Karen blinked quickly, her face twisting between shock and humiliation. Judge Judy continued, "You are not a victim. You are a predator who tried to steal millions of dollars through fraud." The words landed heavily across the courtroom. Karen had entered wearing the costume of an injured consumer, holding tissues, preparing fake tears, and expecting sympathy. Now every part of that image had been stripped away in front of the cameras. Judge Judy did not allow Karen to recover. "Case dismissed," she said, "and you will pay McDonald's legal fees in the amount of $45,000. The courtroom erupted. Some people gasped. Others clapped. The reaction spread fast because everyone understood what had just happened. Karen had not only lost the lawsuit, she had been exposed as someone who tried to use the court system as a personal lottery ticket. Karen collapsed back into her chair, hyperventilating for real this time. Her hands shook as she looked from the monitor to Judge Judy, then to her lawyer, as if someone else might still save her, but nobody could. Rick Morrison sat frozen, unable to speak. His opening statement about corporate manipulation now looked ridiculous. The sympathetic story he had built had been destroyed by his own client's recorded words. His case had not fallen apart gradually. It had been crushed instantly, but Judge Judy was not finished. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Karen. "And Miss Williams, I am forwarding this evidence to the district attorney for potential fraud charges." Karen's face drained of color. This was no longer just about losing a television case. This was about possible criminal consequences. Judge Judy looked toward the court officers. "Please, escort this con artist out of my courtroom." That final line ended Karen's performance completely. The woman who had walked in confident, dressed for sympathy, and ready to become a public victim was now being removed as a fraud. Her tissues were still in her hand, but nobody believed the tears anymore. Her weight gain photos did not matter. Her fake food diary did not matter. Her dramatic story did not matter. The truth had replaced the performance. Within 15 minutes of Judge Judy's ruling, the courtroom footage was already spreading across social media like wildfire. The clip of Karen entering with confidence, followed by the security footage, the secret recording, and her total collapse, became one of the fastest growing videos of the year. People could not stop watching it. TikTok filled with reaction videos. Twitter exploded with memes of Karen's horrified expression. Instagram pages posted clips of Judge Judy's takedown with captions calling it the most satisfying courtroom moment of the year. The hashtag connected to Karen versus McDonald's began trending worldwide within the hour. Millions of people celebrated the moment not because they loved a corporation, but because they hated what Karen represented. She had become the symbol of frivolous lawsuits, fake victimhood, entitlement, and people who try to abuse the system for money. Back at Maple Ridge Estates, Karen's neighbors watched the episode on their phones, computers, and living room televisions with a level of satisfaction they had not felt in years. For them, Karen's downfall was personal. This was not just a woman losing a lawsuit against McDonald's. This was the same HOA president who had terrorized their neighborhood for 3 years. The same woman who had fined them, threatened them, humiliated them, and made them feel like prisoners in their own homes. Maria Santos, Karen's next-door neighbor, watched the verdict and broke down crying. But these were not tears of fear or frustration. They were tears of relief. For 3 years, Maria had watched Karen bully families, elderly residents, children, and anyone who challenged her authority. Now, for the first time, Karen was facing consequences in a way she could not control. Within 2 hours of the verdict, Maple Ridge Estates called an emergency HOA board meeting. The decision was unanimous. Karen Williams was removed as HOA president. Effective immediately, her reign over the neighborhood was officially over. For the residents, it felt like a cloud had lifted. People who had been afraid to decorate their homes, let their children draw on driveways, or make minor changes to their property suddenly realized the woman who had controlled them through fear no longer had power. The media reaction was just as intense. Legal analysts praised Judge Judy's handling of the case, calling it a clear example of how fraudulent claims should be exposed. Commentators pointed out that Judge Judy did not need a complicated legal speech to destroy the lawsuit. She simply showed the evidence in the right order. First the footage, then the receipts, then the recording, then the judgment. The case became a masterclass in how intent, behavior, and documentation can defeat a fake victim narrative. Television hosts picked up the story quickly. Late-night shows turned Karen's courtroom disaster into comedy segments. One host joked about her victim outfit. Another recreated the moment she heard her own recorded voice admitting the scam. But underneath the humor, the public response carried a serious message. People were tired of bullies pretending to be victims. They were tired of frivolous lawsuits. They were tired of people abusing systems designed to help real victims. And Karen had become the perfect example of that abuse. Then McDonald's released its official statement. Instead of attacking Karen or celebrating her humiliation, the company took a measured approach. They said they believed in personal responsibility and healthy choices. They thanked Judge Judy for seeing through the fraudulent claim and protecting businesses from predatory lawsuits. But the final part of the statement made the internet react even more strongly. McDonald's announced that the $45,000 Karen had been ordered to pay in legal fees would be donated to childhood nutrition programs in underserved communities. That decision changed the emotional tone of the story. Karen had tried to turn greed into profit. McDonald's turned her legal defeat into meals for children who actually needed help. The irony was impossible to miss. The public praised the company's response, saying it showed class and restraint. Even people who normally criticized fast food corporations admitted that, in this situation, McDonald's had handled the aftermath perfectly. Meanwhile, Karen's personal world was collapsing in real time. Her real estate office fired her almost immediately, embarrassed by the national attention and unwilling to be associated with her fraudulent lawsuit. The termination email reportedly arrived while Karen was still sitting in the courthouse parking lot, trying to process what had happened. Then her professional license came under review after colleagues complained that she had damaged the reputation of the industry. But the most painful public blow came from her own family. Karen's children, humiliated by what they had seen, posted statements distancing themselves from her behavior. Her daughter wrote that she was horrified and embarrassed by her mother's actions and that the lawsuit did not represent their family's values. For Karen, that was a different kind of collapse. The courtroom had destroyed her case. The internet had destroyed her image. Her neighbors had destroyed her power. Her workplace had destroyed her career. And now her own family was refusing to stand behind her. The legal consequences continued piling up. Not only did Karen owe McDonald's $45,000 in legal fees, but the district attorney's office announced that it was reviewing the evidence for possible fraud charges. Legal experts explained that if prosecutors pursued the case and won, Karen could face serious consequences beyond money. Her lawyer, Rick Morrison, also found himself under scrutiny. The state bar opened an ethics review into whether he had properly examined his client's claims before filing the lawsuit. His reputation took a hit because the public believed he had helped bring a fraudulent case into court without doing enough to verify the facts. But the damage did not stop there. Judges across the county began looking at Karen's other pending lawsuits. And what they found only made things worse. Karen Williams had several active lawsuits already moving through the local court system, and once Judge Judy exposed her McDonald's case as a fraudulent scheme, those other cases began collapsing almost immediately. One of them was against a local bakery. Karen had claimed emotional distress because the bakery used what she called a discriminatory font on a birthday cake. The case had already seemed ridiculous to many people, but after the Judge Judy verdict, no one was willing to treat Karen's complaints as innocent misunderstandings anymore. That lawsuit was dismissed within hours. Another case involved the city itself. Karen had filed a complaint because children were allowed to play loudly in public parks during the hours she personally considered quiet time. She argued that the noise caused emotional harm and reduced the quality of life in her neighborhood. But after the McDonald's fraud exposure, that case also fell apart quickly. Every judge in the county now understood who Karen Williams was. She was not a concerned citizen. She was not a vulnerable victim. She was a professional complainer who had learned to use lawsuits, rules, and accusations as weapons. The courts no longer wanted to waste time entertaining her manufactured grievances. The internet, meanwhile, had turned Karen into one of the most hated women in America almost overnight. Her name became connected to fake victimhood, HOA tyranny, and one of the most embarrassing legal failures ever seen on television. People who had never heard of Maple Ridge Estates suddenly knew everything about its former HOA president. They knew about the McDonald's receipts. They knew about the secret recording. They knew about the teenage employees she had screamed at. They knew about the elderly veteran's wheelchair ramp. They knew about the child's chalk drawings. And they knew that Judge Judy had called her exactly what millions of viewers now believed she was: a con artist. The attention became so intense that Karen's address was shared online, forcing her to hire private security. Protesters gathered outside her home with signs mocking the lawsuit and celebrating Judge Judy's verdict. Some signs read, "Justice for McDonald's." Others said, "Karen got served." Local news trucks parked outside her house, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had tried to turn her own choices into a multi-million-dollar payday. Karen had wanted fame. She had wanted attention. She had wanted the public to see her as a brave woman standing up against corporate power. Instead, she became infamous, and America seemed to love every second of her downfall. But the most meaningful reactions did not come from the internet. They came from the people Karen had actually hurt. At the McDonald's on Elm Street, 18-year-old Sarah Martinez finally felt safe enough to speak openly. Sarah had spent months dealing with Karen's tantrums, insults, and impossible demands. She had been screamed at over sauces, fries, apple pies, and machine problems she could not control. For Sarah, Karen was not just a difficult customer. She was a source of fear. Sarah told reporters that she used to cry in the storage room after Karen left. Karen made her feel worthless, small, and powerless while she was only trying to do her job. But after Judge Judy's ruling, Sarah said she finally felt vindicated. Karen could no longer hurt her or her coworkers the same way again. That was the human side of the case people could not ignore. It was not only about McDonald's. It was about workers, teenage employees, neighbors, families, elderly residents. Anyone Karen had bullied while hiding behind rules, lawsuits, and fake victim stories. In Maple Ridge Estates, retired veteran Harold Thompson sat on his porch without fear for the first time in years. Karen had harassed him repeatedly about his wheelchair ramp, calling it an eyesore and threatening daily fines because it did not meet her strict interpretation of HOA rules. Harold had lost his leg serving his country, but Karen had made him feel like a burden in his own neighborhood simply because he needed a ramp to enter his home. His wife, Margaret, cried when she watched the verdict. She said her husband had given so much for his country, and Karen had tortured him over the very ramp that allowed him to live with dignity. For the Thompson family, Judge Judy's ruling was not just entertainment. It felt like justice. Then there was 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez. For months, Emma had not been allowed to draw chalk rainbows on her own driveway because Karen had issued violation notices for unauthorized children's markings. Her mother had finally told her to stop drawing outside because the family could not afford more fines and conflict. After Karen was removed as HOA president, Emma went outside and drew a bright rainbow across the driveway. Under it, she wrote the words, "Bad Lady Gone." That picture spread through the neighborhood and became a symbol of something simple but powerful: childhood returning to a community that had been ruled by fear for too long. 6 months after Judge Judy's ruling, Karen Williams had vanished from public life. Her house in Maple Ridge Estates sat empty with a for sale sign in the yard. But no serious buyers wanted it once they learned who had lived there. The home had become part of the scandal. People drove by to take pictures. Some laughed. Others shook their heads. The house was no longer just a property. It was a reminder of the woman who had terrorized a neighborhood and then destroyed herself on television. Eventually, Karen quietly moved to a small apartment 3 states away. Her social media accounts were deleted. Her real estate career was ruined. Her reputation was permanently damaged. The $45,000 judgment pushed her into bankruptcy, and the fraud investigation remained active. Karen had spent years believing she could outsmart everyone, but one televised courtroom appearance had taken almost everything from her. She got exactly what she had earned. But while Karen's life was falling apart, The communities she left behind began healing. Molly Ridge Estates elected a new HOA board. Their first major decision was to repeal the ridiculous rules Karen had used to control residents. Children were allowed to play freely again. Families could decorate their homes without fear of petty fines. Elderly and disabled residents could keep accessibility features without being treated like criminals. For the first time in years, neighbors could simply live. The McDonald's on Elm Street also changed after the case. Corporate headquarters sent a plaque recognizing the staff for professionalism under pressure. Sarah Martinez and her coworkers were praised for staying calm despite months of abuse from Karen. The restaurant became a symbol of worker dignity, a place where people remembered that teenage employees deserve respect just as much as anyone else. Judge Judy's handling of the case became one of the most discussed courtroom moments in television history. Law schools began using the footage as an example of how fraudulent claims can collapse when intent is proven clearly. Legal commentators pointed to the case as a perfect demonstration of why evidence order matters. Judge Judy had not overwhelmed the courtroom with every document at once. She revealed the truth step by step. First, the security footage, then the spending records, then the secret recording, then the legal consequences. It was a masterclass in dismantling a false narrative. Other judges reportedly began referencing the case when dismissing frivolous lawsuits, especially cases where plaintiffs tried to turn personal responsibility into someone else's liability. The clip of Judge Judy's takedown continued to spread across platforms, eventually reaching hundreds of millions of views. People watched it not only because it was dramatic, but because it felt deeply satisfying. It showed a bully being stopped. It showed a liar being exposed. It showed a person who had abused systems of power finally facing a system she could not control. Most importantly, Karen's downfall sent a message across the country. Entitled behavior does not always win. Frivolous lawsuits can be exposed. Professional victims can be challenged, and people who use power to terrorize others can eventually face consequences. Karen Williams had built her life around control. As an HOA president, she controlled neighbors with fines and threats. As a customer, she controlled teenage workers with screaming and intimidation. As a plaintiff, she tried to control McDonald's with a fake victim story. But in Judge Judy's courtroom, control was taken away from her. The truth controlled the room. And once the truth took over, Karen had nowhere left to hide McDonald's donation of the $45. Zeros into childhood nutrition programs added the perfect final irony to the case. Karen had tried to turn greed into millions for herself. Instead, her defeat helped feed more than 3,000 children in underserved communities. The woman who had pretended to be a victim created real help for actual children in need, not because she wanted to, because Judge Judy made sure the consequences of her fraud became something useful. That was what made the ending so satisfying. Karen tried to weaponize the court system for selfish gain. The court system turned her greed into accountability. In the end, Judge Judy's final words about Karen Williams proved exactly right. Some people believe they can lie, manipulate, and bully their way into success. They believe if they create enough drama, file enough complaints, and pretend to be victims loudly enough, the world will eventually give them what they want. But the truth has a way of catching up, and when it caught Karen Williams, it did not arrive quietly. It arrived in a packed courtroom on national television with receipts, security footage, a secret recording, and a judge who had no patience left for fake victimhood. Karen had spent years terrorizing innocent people. She had used her HOA position to make families feel uncomfortable inside their own homes. She had targeted elderly residents over accessibility needs, frightened children out of drawing on their own driveways, and treated teenage fast food workers like they were beneath her. Then she tried to take that same pattern into court. She believed the legal system would become another tool she could use for control. She believed she could walk in with tissues, weight gain photos, dramatic testimony, and a lawyer willing to turn her choices into a corporate conspiracy. She believed people would feel sorry for her if she acted helpless enough. But Judge Judy saw through every part of it. That was the reason this case became so satisfying to millions of viewers. It was not only about McDonald's winning a lawsuit. It was about a bully finally being placed in a room where her usual tactics no longer worked. Karen could not find Judge Judy. She could not intimidate the courtroom staff. She could not scream at teenage employees. She could not threaten her neighbors. She could not hide behind HOA rules. She could not pretend the receipts did not exist. And she could not explain away her own recorded voice bragging about the scam. That recording was the moment the entire case became impossible to defend. It did not simply show that Karen had made poor choices. It showed that she had planned the lawsuit. It showed that she knew what she was doing. It showed that she was not trying to recover from harm. She was trying to profit from fraud. Once the courtroom heard Karen say she wanted to gain weight, sue McDonald's, and retire early from the settlement, the victim's story was finished. There was nothing left to save. And Judge Judy made sure the consequence matched the lie. The dismissal of the case destroyed Karen's dream of becoming rich through a fake claim. The $45. Zero legal fee judgment punished her attempt to waste everyone's time and resources. The referral to the district attorney turned her humiliation into a potential criminal matter. And the public exposure ensured that Karen could never quietly return to the same pattern without people remembering exactly who she was. That was real accountability, not just losing, being seen clearly. Karen had wanted to become famous as the brave woman who took on McDonald's. Instead, she became famous as the HOA president who tried to scam a corporation and got dismantled by Judge Judy in front of the entire country. But the most important impact of the case was not Karen's downfall. It was the freedom her downfall gave to the people around her. At Maple Ridge Estates, life changed almost immediately. Neighbors who had spent years worrying about Karen's notices, fines, and threats were finally able to breathe. Children could play outside without parents fearing another violation letter. Families could decorate their homes without worrying that one small detail would become Karen's next obsession. Veterans and disabled residents could make their homes accessible without being treated like criminals. People could live like neighbors again instead of suspects. That was the part of the story that made Karen's removal so meaningful. Her power had not been harmless. It had affected daily life. It had created anxiety in a place where people were supposed to feel safe. She had turned community rules into personal weapons, and when she lost power, the neighborhood did not just celebrate, it healed. The McDonald's employees also felt that healing. For months, Sarah Martinez and her coworkers had dealt with Karen's abuse while simply trying to do their jobs. They were teenagers, part-time workers, and young employees standing behind a counter expected to smile while being shouted at by a woman who believed the world existed to serve her. Karen's exposure gave them something they had not had before validation. The public now understood what they had endured. People saw that Karen's behavior was not just one angry customer moment. It was part of her personality, part of the same pattern that had hurt her neighbors and fueled her lawsuit. When Sarah said she finally felt vindicated, that mattered because workers like Sarah are often expected to absorb disrespect quietly. They are told to stay polite, keep smiling, and not escalate. But this case reminded everyone watching that service workers are human beings too. They deserve dignity. They deserve safety. They deserve not to be screamed at because a customer believes money gives them permission to be cruel. Karen's case also became a warning about frivolous lawsuits. Courts exist to help real victims, not to reward people who manufacture harm for profit. When someone abuses that system, they do not only waste legal resources, they make it harder for genuine victims to be believed. That was why Judge Judy's reaction was so severe. She understood the damage false claims can do. They hurt businesses, they hurt workers, they burden courts, they create cynicism, and they insult the people who truly need justice. Karen had tried to dress greed in the language of victimhood. She had tried to turn her own choices into a multi-million-dollar blame game. But the evidence told a different story, and Judge Judy forced that story into the open. The aftermath proved that consequences can ripple far beyond a verdict. Karen lost her HOA position. She lost her job. Her professional reputation collapsed. Her pending lawsuits fell apart. Her family publicly distanced themselves. Her neighbors rejected her. Her online image became permanently tied to fraud and entitlement. And the one thing she had wanted most, public sympathy, never arrived. Instead, she became a national example of what happens when a bully finally meets evidence strong enough to stop her. The $45 Zeusen donation to childhood nutrition programs gave the story its final irony. Karen had tried to take money from McDonald's through a false claim. Instead, the money she was ordered to pay helped feed children who actually needed support. Her greed was converted into something useful for people who had nothing to do with her selfish plan. That ending felt almost poetic. Karen wanted millions for herself. The consequence of her failure helped children. That is the kind of justice people remember. Judge Judy's handling of the case became legendary because it was not just dramatic. It was precise. She did not let Karen control the emotional tone. She did not let the lawyer's speech distract from the facts. She did not let the courtroom become a stage for fake suffering. She used evidence. She used timing. She used Karen's own words. And then she delivered the truth in a way nobody could ignore. That is why the clip kept spreading. People did not only watch because Karen was humiliated. They watched because the case gave them something they rarely get to see so clearly. A dishonest person being stopped at the exact moment she expected to win. For every neighbor Karen bullied, every employee she screamed at, every business she threatened, and every person who had been made to feel powerless by someone like her, the verdict felt personal. It felt like relief. It felt like justice. And it reminded people that bullies can look powerful for a long time, but power built on lies eventually breaks. Karen Williams learned that lesson in the hardest way possible. She walked into court expecting millions. She walked out owing money, facing possible charges, losing her position, losing her reputation, and becoming the public face of entitled behavior gone wrong. Her story proved that personal responsibility still matters. Choices have consequences. Evidence beats performance. And the truth, no matter how long it takes, can still win. Judge Judy did not just dismiss a lawsuit that day. She exposed a pattern. She protected the court from fraud. She defended workers and neighbors who had been treated unfairly. And she turned one woman's selfish scheme into a national reminder that lying, bullying, and pretending to be a victim cannot protect you forever. Sometimes justice is loud, sometimes justice is quiet, and sometimes justice sounds like a judge calmly playing the one recording that destroys the entire lie. For Karen Williams, that recording was the end. For everyone she had hurt, it was the beginning of peace.